All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. So today's offering is the second in a series of 5 panels that we're hosting as part of this symposium on cooperative financial institutions and rural development. For this session, we are offering simultaneous interpretation. You can select your preferred language of English, Spanish, or French using the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen. Your microphone for the audience will be disabled for this call, so if you would like to ask a question of our panelist or moderator, please use the Q&A icon that is at the bottom of the screen. And finally, we will have this session recorded, and we will post the recordings on our website. And on our website, you can also find more information about the other sessions that we are offering next week. With that, I will pass it over to Max Saenz, who is leading this session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Anne, for the introduction. Greetings from Montreal, Canada. Thank you for being with us in this panel 2 webinar on key to promoting successful and contribute CFI in rural areas. We have many participants now in this moment connected with us, coming from around the world. My name is Maximiliano Saenz, and I'm the Expertise and Development Director at Développement International Desjardins. Very, very pleased to be with you today. I will be the moderating of this panel. En DID hemos apoyado a las cooperativas financieras
At DID, we have supporting these cooperatives during the last 50 years. We have supported the creation of several cooperatives throughout the years, but today we're working mainly to strengthen existing financial cooperatives in their development based on experience and the knowledge of the Desjardins group, of which we are part. Desjardins is the biggest financial cooperative in North America. These cooperatives I was mentioning and that we will discuss today are key actors in your communities and strengthen these communities.
Today to have such high quality panelists. I would like to present the 3 panelists we have today and their great trajectory of those professionals and how they have contributed to financial inclusion and rural development. I began with Elenita San Roque. Hi, Elenita. Elenita San Roque is the Chief Executive Officer of the Association of Asian Confederation of Credit Unions, the Regional Confederation of National Credit Union Association for 23 countries in Asia. ACCU represents 24 cooperative networks, bringing together 31,000 credit unions with more than 49 million members. In its mission of promoting and strengthening credit unions, ACCU spearheads the development, advocacy, think tank, and international representation of the Asian credit union movement. Welcome, Elenita San Roque, today with us. Thank you to being with us. Nuestro segundo panelista.
Our second panelist is Mr. Jose Claros. Jose is now the general manager of Abaco, a savings and credit cooperative based in Lima, Peru. Abaco has as objective improving the quality of life of its members, not only offering financial products and services that are customized and simple, but also strengthening sustainable development. Abaco started in 1981 and has about 120 employees and 14,000 active clients, of which 30% are women. Jose Claros also is business managers and a specialist in associative and cooperative models with over 25 years as the leader of multidisciplinary teams. Welcome, Jose Claros. It is a pleasure to have you with us, for you to share your wealth of experience on cooperative and associative models. Our last panelist today is Isabel Pinto. She is a professional in business administration, specialized in management. She has worked in the cooperative sector as manager, leading financial inclusion processes and strengthening processes, providing support to the agricultural sector. She was the manager at Comultrasan, a Colombian savings and credit cooperative, which offers agricultural loans and micro-rural loans, amongst others.
For being with us today to contribute on the reflection of CFI's role in rural development. Before moving on questions, interacting with panelists, I would like to let the audience know that you have a Q&A available if you want to make some comments throughout the presentation. It's important that you wrote to whom you're going to make the question or comment. So at the end of the presentation, a colleague from the World Bank or France, my colleague, will give me the question and comment from you. Tomar en cuenta también que tienen a disposición.
Please bear in mind that we have simultaneous interpretation services. Before moving on to the questions and comments and the exchange, which is what we'd like to share with you today, I'd like to make a brief introduction to such a relevant topic as this one is, knowing what is happening today. We are right now having the COP26, and we know that between this issue and the pandemic, well, we see how this has affected rural development. So allow me to make a brief introduction to set the stage for the issues we will discuss with our panelists. By their very nature, CFIs are socioeconomic leaders, and they can make a long-lasting difference in rural communities. We saw this during the pandemic. We saw it with the issue of climate change and other challenges. Normally, we associate financial cooperatives with the issue of improving access to financial services. And many times we forget that these cooperatives play other roles. They, for example, foster innovation in the agricultural sector. They allow rural development. They allow these rural businesses to take off. And they also have an impact on climate smart agriculture, improving the sustainable value chains for food. Amongst other issues, we are aware of the challenges we have in the rural sector when it comes to generational renewal and the inclusion of minorities and women in rural businesses. Also, the increase of access of women to economic opportunities. All this makes CFIs contribute to agricultural systems that are sounder and more sensitive to gender and nutrition. You can see in the chart on the screen all of these issues that are related to what we could consider to be an agricultural system that is sensitive to gender issues, to climate change and nutrition. On our part at DID, we've been working for 50 years. We've provided support with the creation and strengthening of financial cooperatives. We've learned there are some key success factors. Which are these factors? And the questions I'll pose later on have to do with this. Which are these key success factors for the development of the rural sector? Of course, there is something to be said about having a sound governance both at financial cooperatives and agricultural companies, having also a service offer that is customized to the needs and challenges members face, whether these are cooperatives, smallholders, entrepreneurs, women, youth. They all have specific needs, and all of the services and products provided to them need to bear in mind these specific challenges. Also, an appropriate use of digital technology. We saw this with the pandemic. Those who were ready in these regards became innovators with the implementation of these services and products of digital nature. Other of us had to start when the pandemic struck. Also, it has to do with access to capital through innovative ways, for example, impact or blended investment. Likewise, strong measures to protect clients' information and assets, a high level of integration so as to have economies of scale and ensure efficiency. And the last factor that we will tackle with the panelists today is what has to do with regulators, because they need to adapt their policies and requirements to the specific nature of CFIs. We know they have operations similar to those of banks, but their structure and governance are different from them.
On the different subjects I mentioned. So I'm gonna go for the first questions, asking first to Elenita, which factors you think are central for the development of your organizations and sectors. I'm going to say it in Spanish also. Para ustedes, ¿qué factor ha sido
So what do you think are factors that have been central to the sound development of organizations or sectors, and how have they impacted rural development?
I give you the I give you, Elenita, la voz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max, for that question, and also thank you for having me. So the factors that I would think, have been the reason why cooperative financial institutions are successful in this part of the world, in Asia, is that the development concept of cooperatives and credit unions are the ones that are still very relevant today. When I say the development concept, it's the non-for-profit principles. And credit unions are still existing today with using the principles of self-help and mutual help. And even, since the time that first credit unions was established in 172 years ago, that principle is still valid today. And the more it is valid during this time of pandemic, because self-help means we are developing the resilience of people. Self-help means people are learning how to stand on their own 2 feet. And if people are not resilient these days, they will have a lot of difficulties because of the pandemic. The elements of financial inclusion, which is savings, having a bank account, insurance, payments, financial advising, and business advising is also part of the credit union operations. And the reason why we are doing this in the credit union, it's a culture of the credit union. It's because we wanted our members to achieve their life goals and aspirations. The impact of it in Asia is very huge because you have already introduced me as I represent the Asian Confederation of Credit Unions. The credit union system in Asia has a big turnaround in the 1960s. And most of our network, 24 networks of the Asian Confederation, had a turnaround in the 1960s. And today, the Asian credit union movement represents 48 or 49 million individual members from 23 countries in Asia. The impact is it generated employment of around 700,000 employees. It also generated, it's also activate volunteers, which may be around 1 million of them. Credit unions are quite, how do I say, a way of life in some countries. One of the successful credit union system and very integrated credit union system in Asia is the Korean credit union, which actually represents around 21% of the total working population in Korea. Like, for example, I can say also that in Nepal, it's about 15% of the total economically active population. And in the Philippines, it's around 18% of the economically active population. So that is the impact that we see in credit unions. They are not small organizations now or financial institutions. They are large institutions now. So we wanted them to be regulated as the same way as other financial institutions are regulated, because they are managing hard-earned money of people. So that's it.
Thank you, Elenita. Ahora me dirijo a José Claros.
Now I will go to Jose Claros. How did the financial cooperatives develop in Peru? And what is key when we say that they develop in the field? Is there a difference with other types of financial institutions? Do you also agree with what Elenita says regarding the distinction it has at the level of ethics and values? You have the floor. Thank you, and thank you very much to Desjardins for your invitation. I agree with what Elenita is saying. We are organizations that are trying to do good and balance this with profitability. So we look for inclusion. We are looking to reach areas where the traditional banking institutions do not reach. We provide simple services, as she said, and also we are very close to our partners or institutions that perform in this field. We were talking about technical assistance, financial cooperation, not only financial inclusion through financing loans, but also through savings, which is another fundamental area we cover, so that these areas, these rural areas can have a savings capability and generate wealth or prosperity, if you will, in each of their areas. And something that we have been seeing through the development of these rural institutions is that we need to promote the values of the association and the cooperation area. We have to find a lot of this and to educate people in that sense. We need to get rid of individualism and cooperate for a common goal. And that is what the cooperative movement means in the rural area. Sometimes it is well understood, but the governance is something that we need to work on. So we try to promote this, to educate them on the principles of association, of cooperation, and they can be better together. And we teach them that, and this goes towards the development of the rural areas, particularly those that receive less services because they are more remote. And this is a key aspect. Regulation of supervisors is a key factor, so that we have this model of cooperative businesses go ahead with risk management, with adequate risk management, and all other areas. Thank you very much, Jose. a great many ideas, and we will have to discuss this later with the next questions, ideas on how we can make regulators and government officials understand the cooperative movement better. So thank you very much. And I would now go to Isabel. Um, and I would like to ask the question in another way, a little bit more controversial. The question is, could the rural areas develop without cooperatives? From the perspective of Colombia, knowing that Colombia and Peru, countries that have very isolated rural areas with very deficient roads and digital connections, do you believe, Isabel, that the rural areas could develop without financial cooperatives? Jose was telling us that cooperatives sometimes reach areas where no other financial institutions go. We cover the most territory in a country. So, what do you think? Well, thank you very much for your invitation. Undoubtedly, the cooperative sector in Colombia, savings and loan associations, have been able to uh, strengthen the agricultural area in our country. Elenita and Jose discussed this, and and I would like to compliment uh, if not for cooperatives, particularly in Colombia, where we have a very dispersed population and many productive activities are done in the agricultural and livestock field. And these savings and loan cooperatives have been the only ones able to reach uh, areas where no other institutions offer loans, and they have been able to uh, trigger the establishment of a certain buffer for the people in the field. We saw this during the pandemics. It has played a fundamental role in um, helping people survive and thrive during the pandemic. And without these cooperatives, this development would not be present because the cooperatives are the bodies that are at the forefront of developing products that can leverage and strengthen their activity so that all these small businessmen, because people in Colombia who have their own lot of land and grow produce are entrepreneurs. We do have to remember that. And this is where you have a possibility to develop their families and their communities. And we have to remember that these cooperatives have been fundamental in supporting this. I was a general manager of a credit union in Colombia that was very small when I was managing it, and then it grew. And then I became a manager of the largest savings and loan cooperative in Colombia. And in those two institutions, the main pillar is the partner, and the partner is the owner of the company. So we need to remember that we are dealing with the owner of the cooperative, and we have to design products to um, develop according to the needs of the customer. We need customized products because this will allow them to promote their activities and to be a motor, an important factor that will allow Colombia to become what you already see, a country rich in resources, rich in people, and we are the pillars for this development. Thank you very much, Isabel. And as Jose was saying as well, the rural areas of these countries are very important. I lived 4 years in Colombia and I worked with several producers in different food chains, and the rural areas are always together in associations. So the cooperative movement has to be well understood. And I go back to what Jose was saying. We have to understand that they are the owners of these institutions. It's not a company that is separated from the customer, but they are the ones who support the governance activities.
Um, ask Elenita again. Uh, what do you think are the trends and challenge in the coming years for CFIs, and how you think you're gonna face them in Asia? I'm thinking about climate change. I'm thinking about regulation. I'm thinking about, conflicts in the markets. We can think about China, USA. Uh, we have a lot of desafíos. We have a lot of trends going on. How you gonna face those changes to answer better to your members, because it's always the goal for the cooperatives. Thank you. We can. I think your audio's off.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry for that. I think I will address the immediate trend. Because of the pandemic in the last 2 years, there is a rising poverty, and definitely members of the credit unions are affected. Even they are employed, they are now underemployed. I just read the World Bank article and saying that there will be around 150 million people will be added to poverty. And when we look at the Asian countries and where our members are located in developing world, there's a per country, especially in South Asia and Southeast Asia, there is an increase in poverty, and those are members of credit unions. Imagine that we have 49 million individual members. So it looks like, as we are climbing to get them to their financial destination, but now they slide back. So, I think this is the immediate trend that we need to address in the credit union movement, because we cannot let them to dive into poverty. The response, what we are saying to our members is that, in order to get out of this pandemic, it's not managing your operation, it's managing your members, helping the members to get out of poverty, helping the members to develop skills so that they will have chances to get employment. And so we launched a program. The Asian Confederation of Credit Unions is now very active in helping our members to install or institutionalize their business development services, because it is not just lending. Of course, we can tell the members you need to save up in order to prepare for emergencies. But the next question is, how can they save up if they do not have jobs? So we need to help them to create jobs, self-employment. And I think with the institutionalization of business development support, the members would be able to see opportunities in small businesses so that they can create employment or create employment for others. The second trend that I see is that credit unions are growing. You wouldn't believe that during this pandemic, credit unions will tell me, wow, we have excess liquidity. Maybe someone will think during the pandemic, credit unions will run out of funds. But no, it's the different case here. Credit unions are awash of cash. It's because people see credit union as a caring institution. During the pandemic, I have seen in Nepal, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, credit unions go out and prepare food packs and distribute that to their members. People have seen that credit unions are caring institutions, and then they attract people with money to deposit money to them. And they offer quite a little bit higher interest rates compared with other financial institutions. they are now into, how do I say, difficulty because the lending side also slowed down. And so they have excess liquidity and their business has slowed down because of this pandemic. I think there will be some sort of regulatory credit unions need to have enabling regulations so that they will be able to balance their social aspects or social responsibility to the community and also their financial soundness. We have been working with DID and in the last, I think since 2012, and we are really advocating for credit unions to have more integration, like integration in such a way that they would be standardized, integration in such a way that credit unions will comply with financial financial standards, integration so that credit unions will have safety nets, as which is an example of that is the stabilization fund, regulation that credit unions would be supervised. In other countries, the credit unions will say, we are over-regulated. But in this part of the world, we are telling to the regulators, please regulate us. Because credit unions is very important to be regulated because they are managing hard-earned money of people. And, and they are also part of the financial system. Now they are really big enough and they are not just a social institution. They are not, welfare institution. They are really financial institution that offering financial solutions to members at any stage of life. So I think that's the two trends. And of course, maybe I will talk later about the payment system or digitization, but I will stop at this point.
Yeah, you can give us some example in the other questions. You told me about some examples in Nepal and Philippines about the platform, but we can go for Jose and then come back with your example. Thank you, Elenita. José, nuevamente, ¿cuáles son los desafíos? Podríamos decir mundiales, pero
Jose,
también.
once again, which are the challenges in the world? But in the case of Peru, you had the challenge of being the country that lost the most growth. In Latin America, I believe they had about 10% during the pandemic. You also had some challenges vis-a-vis vaccination and health. You have a new government with some differences with prior governments. So when faced with all of those challenges, how do you see specifically for financial cooperatives the situation in Peru? Because we all need to get ahead of challenges. We must be innovative. We need to think of tomorrow in a context that changes all the time. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Maximiliano. Yes, there's an extra factor, and I'd like for us to think of Peru and the challenges for credit cooperatives. These challenges started in 2019. We became part of the direct supervision of the banking supervision agency, and we have to comply with standards vis-a-vis processes, and also for the professionalization of cooperatives. Along the road, we've continued to develop ourselves. We've held discussions with the regulator also. For many years, cooperatives have started to build their own models. They've started to build their services without as many demands from a regulator, without having to comply with so many standards. But they've been able to provide support to the rural sector. Today, the challenge is bigger. We have a new government, and today it is not quite clear what the path will be. But based on what we've seen from them, they are promoting what has to do with cooperative work. This faced many issues throughout the years because cooperatives were not part of government policy. This was not an issue that was on the table. So as I was saying before, cooperatives, not just financial, but also productive ones, face challenges. Today, it seems like the situation has changed, and we hope that our government can create state policy. I believe those are the challenges. As Elenita was saying, COVID-19 has changed our perspectives, our outlook. Our sanitary risk has gone down. We are again able to go out and interact with our partners, but it is complex. What has to do with the health issue and taking the necessary care. Remember that our partners are the owners of the cooperative, but if you don't go to them, this affects their sense of belonging and the relationship with our partners. So that is a challenge, the pandemic, because we need to go back to the field, meet with our partners, meet with partners associations. Also, with regards to the increase in poverty levels, there have been low levels of knowledge and connectivity. Maybe someone has a smartphone, but they do not know how to use the applications, or and then it becomes hard for them to use certain automated tools. Maybe they have the hardware, but they do not have connectivity. So how to get them to that point? We can talk about the digital world and digital tools, but how to increase the level of education and of connectivity people have. I think that's what we need to focus on. All of those challenges you mentioned could raise some flags for the government to see, well, we should provide greater connectivity, we should work on digital education, financial education. Have you seen that? And I ask the three of you, have you seen an increase in this kind of interest with the pandemic? Did the pandemic bring about a reckoning on the part of public actors? Do they know that they need to do something to address certain bottlenecks? And I'll begin with Isabel. What do you think the pandemic left in these regards? Right now, we have had to move on to this virtual mode, and we have realized that the countryside needs to have digitalization. Do you believe public actors have also understood that and they will invest in this and in other bottlenecks to develop the countryside? Yes, Max, the pandemic has caused people to reflect at world level. In Colombia and Latin America, I believe this has been like a lighthouse that has made our governments decide to support access to technology for communication, beginning with the issue that our own children needed to have access to virtual tools to be able to attend school lessons. Also, the government has focused on how different products can be sold. And through these credit and savings systems, we have worked on the chain of value, the farmer can also sell his or her own products virtually. I believe with the pandemic, the government has also paid more attention to investing in this sector. It's a sector that allows us to have food every day. It's the sector that gives rise to greater development. And I believe it not only has to do with communication, it also has to do with access to certain areas to be able to get the products. Because if you have certain crops, but you cannot take them to the place where they will be traded, well, that's a big problem. So this has been a life lesson for everyone, I believe. And the government is providing increasing support, and this has to be the case. All of this has also given rise to policies to mitigate risk. Which kind of risk am I talking about? Well, Elenita was saying in the last question, there was an increase in savings. That is to say, there was too much liquidity, too much savings, and these cooperatives had lots of funds to provide, but people did not request those funds because they did not need them at the time. I believe as a result, we, the consumers, need to have to understand that the agricultural sector requires that support. This is what will allow us to continue. We need to have clean agricultural production too. This is something we want to work on because we cannot consume products if they are not appropriate for human consumption. They need to be products that help us lead a better quality of life. Thank you so much, Isabel. I remember when I went to Colombia last year, the farmers did not stop in neither of our countries. We had the pandemic, and I would look at photos of these ghost towns, but the rural sector continued to work. They continued to feed the cities in a way. Human beings cannot survive without food, but I believe, and we need to take advantage of the fact that this has raised awareness amongst all the stakeholders that the rural sector is essential in the same way we understood the healthcare sector was essential, the true heroes. I have a third question for Jose first, what has to do with access to financing. How should financial cooperatives increase access to financing? As you know, given different structural issues, this is a very important issue. How do we fund ourselves, given that we cannot issue shares at the stock exchange? How to have access to financing, which are the main mechanisms, but without forgetting that that access can have some consequences on our own governance and priorities. I have those two questions and a third one based on the two previous ones. What type of investors could be the ones that have the best fit with the needs of cooperatives? Maybe you have an example of good practices in Peru about this, or something that your cooperative is doing. Thank you. Thank you, Max. It is, as you were saying, essential to increase the services and access to financing to rural areas. And both issues are a priority. Governance for our organizations and what has to do with growth through an increase in net worth and investment. This has happened to us. We have been growing, but for that we have had to have continuous improvement of our models, and also key is this increase in your net worth. There are certain cooperatives that start to grow, and they have this growth that is not accompanied by the contributions of the members, but the profitability of the cooperatives or their capacity to strengthen their own wealth through results.
And this is something that we have been adjusting in our plans. Our plans in Abaco began a few years back with strategic plans on profitability and growth, and we had to change it in order to capitalize. First, we prioritized profitability and then returns because we had to grow, and then we needed more capital. So this is where we also began to establish links with not so much with investors, but with funds or multilateral institutions that were willing to help us in this strengthening the increase in our capital and to give us windows for growth to improve our profitability, capitalize our resources, and and start increasing our services to our partners. And this is where we went to IDB and IDB Lab, and they gave us a subordinated loan. Us being a cooperative, we didn't have an option to subordinate a loan immediately or capitalize it as other commercial institutions did. But the IDB understood well our needs, the needs to leverage our cooperative, and I think we're now in our seventh year of that subordinated loan in a cooperative, which was not an easy task to convince them to give us this loan. But we also have now a subordinated loan with the Desjardins Group, and we need to keep on strengthening our capital to improve our financial services, our rate of return. Of course, cooperatives have a service mission, but they have to be profitable, they have to be efficient, and also the issue of governance, the issue of corporate governance, uh, the capability of officials and capability of people who receive our services. So investors is not the right word, but we did reach out to many funds and also private or multilateral institutions that could help us grow. And another factor which is always present, and we also study this a lot, is the issue of strategic partnerships, such as Cicreo in Brazil. We are trying to establish networks that will allow us to be more efficient, reduce our costs. It's still not, we're still not there. We still do not understand that there is safety in numbers. If you allow me, what would be the fear? Is the fear of losing control over the uh, activities of the organization? If I work in a network, others will decide on my behalf, and I can't be faithful to our mission. Yes, it's a bit of that. It's a bit of individualism. It's it's a matter of thinking that you are the leader of your cooperative, and if you are part of a network, you will be just one of a bunch of people. So this is what we think several times, and it gives us a bit of fear. And another factor that works against us in countries such as Peru and other South American countries such as Colombia is that in the last few years we have had a very good economic growth. And if the uh, times are good, if you are growing, you think you don't need the help of anyone because you can do everything alone. So why be part of a network if you can do all this alone? You, if you are thinking of having a single platform for everyone, you might not accept that because you have your own platform and times are good. Regarding Big Lab, briefly, when you had this sovereign debt from IDB Lab, did the IDB place some conditionalities in terms of governance or not? Well, there was more of a series of financial covenants, not as much governance covenants, but the the fact is that Avaco had a very stable trajectory. We have had 40 years of institutional life, and throughout this period, we have been able to keep some internal guidelines, which are not written down because, of course, we are trying to perform our services. Democracy is not perfect, but we do have principles of equality. But inside the institution, we have promoted leadership. So the president of the board of directors is a professional who has had a large trajectory in other boards. And this was something that allowed us to work with him to lead our organization. So we have prepared our leaders, our executive directors, our delegates, in order to maintain a certain stability when it comes to governance. And this is what convinced the IDB and other institutions. Of course, we do have financial troubles as any other financial institution.
How should CFI increase their access to finance? How they can use the blended finance, the impact investment, and how for another and how this investment can have a can have an impact on the governance and financial cost. Also, what kind of investor can best answer co-op's needs? If you can give us some example. Thank
you. Yes. How do I say this? Because in our experience, credit unions have their own central finance facility, and they mobilize excess liquidity from the system, and that central finance liquidity is enough to answer the needs, the lack of capital of credit unions. If ever we need investors in the cooperative system, I think we need social investors. The social investors where they can accelerate the development of credit unions. I think in the area of building human capital in credit unions, because at the moment it's kind of costly to train people. As credit unions are voluntary organizations, and when the board of directors are elected during the annual general meeting, those board of directors might not have the capacity or skills or competence to run a financial institutions the following day. And so we need a lot of training for those board of directors to gain skills in managing and overseeing the operations of credit unions. So I would say we have an example in Korea that Korea has built their training institute for the cooperative system in Korea. And that is why all the staff of credit unions are trained in the training institute. CEOs of credit unions need to get certification from the National Federation. Loan officers need to get certification from the National Federation, because we saw that these are the critical positions in credit unions. we cannot, compromise the viability and safety and soundness of credit unions by having unqualified people running the credit union. So if there are social investors, I would say that in other countries in Asia, we really need to build a training institute that will build the human capital of credit unions. If there are also social investors, we would love to see that they would be partnering with us to support us in building our interoperable payment system, because that is a very great need for credit unions today. The governments are pushing financial institutions to digitize their financial services, and it's kind of costly. And if credit unions would be using fintechs, they would be moving their money out of the credit union system. And that is going to drain the resources of credit unions. But credit unions has a capability to manage their own interoperable system, which we are experiencing now in the Philippines. But the credit union movement in the Philippines have invested huge amount of money to develop their own payment system.
Thank you, Elenita. Muy inspirador.
Thank you very much, Elenita. These answers inspire us because we have heard about the leadership requirement in our institutions and how that can attract investments. And investors must be sensible to the need for leadership in these institutions. Now I will go to the next question, which has to do with the factors of success in these organizations. And we discussed this when we talked about the COVID-19 and the need for a digital transformation, which is part of our day-to-day realities. Jose, where is your cooperative in the area of digital transformation? How could you cooperate and not compete with fintech? What are the trends in the market? Do you have applications for this purpose? And Elenita was telling us about some examples in which they themselves commission systems for digital payments instead of going to a fintech to do so. How can we cooperate? How can we work better with these fintechs? And another question or sub question would be, I hope we are coming out of the pandemic, and what will be the impact of this? Will we carry on with digitalization, or will we forget all the challenges that COVID-19 gave rise to when it comes to digitalization? And of course, I'm reminded of other questions because we must remember that we work with smallholders and we can increase our activities, but we need to be conscious of the demand. So they need training too in these areas. Jose, you have the floor. Thank you, Max. Yes, this is a complex issue. The issue of digital transformation can be approached from several points of view. First of all, the digitalization of cooperatives and how this works in favor of their members, of their associates. And this is why I was talking about knowledge and connectivity, which is a great challenge for the cooperatives. They need to transform their associates, particularly in the rural areas, and they must be made part of the digital world. And this is quite a challenge. COVID has influenced this area. We have had to rethink our products, our strategies, our applications as well, geolocation, a series of let's say, of issues that we did not handle before and that the health area gave rise to. So in the institution, we have to see how we transform our activities digitally, but this digital transformation must include associates and members, particularly farmers. We have associates not only in the cities, but in rural areas. So this involves youth, involves a gender perspective as well, uh, business women, and others who work with us. And the issue of fintech is a rather controversial, I wouldn't say controversial issue, but it's are they allies or not? Do they generate more work, or do they open new channels?
For example, digital payments is something that was being mentioned. And this is necessary also to have collaboration channels so that we can continue to adapt them to the needs of our members. I believe the key is scale. To the extent we can have more users, more transactions, this will allow us to have greater coverage. The challenge is to work with the different segments of the cooperative organizations. With the rural sector, in my experience, the willingness of rural people of using applications, not so much. It has to do with education, and this has to do with the issue of digital transformation. Elenita.
Tell us a bit about your experience. You told me in Philippines with this implementing this network and payment platform, with or without fintech. How you manage that? I mean, where you can see the collaboration, and where you can see there's no collaboration, or anyway, a bit about this experience. Thank
Okay. Yeah. On our point of view, we are saying that fintechs are disruptors, but we are saying in our initiative, we disrupt the disruptors. Because what we did is we created our own fintech. We created our own payment platform. It's not owned by fintech company, but it's owned by our two networks in the Philippines. It was in the Philippines. So at the beginning, we learned from DID that it would be very efficient for credit unions to have one core banking solution. But it was very difficult for us to convince credit unions to use one core banking solution. So we were in the point that we were searching for answers, and we saw that there is a window of opportunity to build our own platform to offer payment system for credit unions. So we helped our member to find a tech IT company which has a global reputation. They develop our payment platform, but the key is that our network manage, govern, and do all the operations of the payment platform. The IT company is only just providing us the technology, but they are the ones governing, and they are the ones doing the pricing. The advantage of this is that we find the strength of credit unions, because if they will collaborate with each other, they would be able to build, because they have 8 million individual members in the Philippines. So if the 8 million individual members, so for example, only 50% of it will patronize and will use the platform has a greater chance of sustainability. Right now, credit unions are not agents of fintechs. Credit unions are sharing the income from the fees that they are charging from the users of the platform. The central bank has recognized and given a certificate for our platform to operate. Only that what we are waiting now is that the integration of our platform to the greater ecosystem, because right now the platform is within the credit union system and it is now integrated in the ATM switch of the banks. So credit unions can withdraw money from the bank. They can issue ATMs without even buying an ATM machines. They have POS. They have several channels that they offer to their members. During the pandemic, it was very useful because when in the name of financial inclusion, this POS is running in the rural areas and members can transact with their ATM cards and they can transact with their credit unions with the collector of the credit unions going house to house in the rural areas. People in the rural areas do not need to go to the town to transfer money because they can do that in their own payment platform. Uh, the World Council of Credit Unions has also recognized that this initiative of the Philippines is a innovation on technology, and yeah, we are very happy with what we did in the Philippines. But it takes time. You know, the numbers of credit union might be our strengths. Democracy might be a strength of credit unions, but sometimes it's also a weakness because the decision making takes long time. So that's what we experience.
Thank you very much, Elenita. Muy inspirador esta iniciativa
Such an inspiring initiative of your network, and I can imagine just listening about it, what it entailed in terms of the work you had to do to be able to implement this, as you were saying, with regards to the decision-making process, which can be a bit slow in a cooperative model. I'd like to give the floor now to Isabel with this question, which is such a topical issue, climate change. Right now, the COP26 is taking place in Scotland. Climate change is a big problem. Let's hope our leaders make good decisions and for them to be brave enough to do so. How can financial cooperatives contribute to the fight against climate change, and how can they protect the environment? Which measures have you implemented, or what discussions have you undertaken? Sometimes it's not to do with actions, but this process of raising awareness. Sometimes it is important to decide to bet on a green product, try to support a value chain. How are you seeing this? What is your experience? How do you see it from Comultrasan? How do you see it from Colombia? Thank you. Undoubtedly, in Colombia, savings and credit cooperatives, I think the fact that cooperatives are providing loans to support projects, well, we need to foster this because so that the project has a follow-up, so as to ensure we have clean agricultural production, so that there is no further environmental pollution. Sometimes it is necessary to do logging for certain projects. I believe it is important to do a follow-up with environmental authorities so that we can facilitate conservation. We should facilitate crops, but farmers and agricultural businessmen need to have the awareness that it is important to have projects that have to do with our environment, for example, tree planting, also what has to do with the waste. For example, in the coffee production, waste cannot be dumped in a certain place. That waste needs to be processed to generate new products. And we have had some activities so that certain types of waste can be used to create organic manure. For example, from the shell of some products, we are creating an input to produce a particular drink. So cooperatives, through their members, their owners, and communities at large, need to support this. And we need to raise awareness. How do we do this? By doing a follow-up and by undertaking education projects in our communities so that we can have a healthy environment, so that our countries can have lungs and guarantee us good quality of life. Thank you, Isabel. Evidently, there is a lot of awareness raising work to undertake. Jose, what's the outlook of Peru? Peru is seen as one of the ones that foster fair trade, certification, and projects that support the environment. How can we support the rural sector with green loans so that, as Isabel was saying, we can take initiatives to another level? Sometimes we need more initiatives to support indigenous peoples, women, youth. Sometimes we can see how important their thinking is because they have a more circular thinking than we do. How can we support them? This is something that Isabel and Elenita have mentioned before. What has to do with the fight against climate change. This is key. Awareness raising is essential, and I think we need to think about how internalized new generations have this issue. They are the ones that will take over at some point as new members of the organization. But we also should be working with them and increasing their awareness from the get-go. We need to work excluding certain activities. There is a list of activities that we have all committed to not funding. It is important to assess environmental protection projects, social impact. We need to tie our practices to those. We need to train our personnel to see how to identify a green loan or how to turn a project into a green project. Maybe there are projects that have a good purpose, but how to turn this into a green loan? For example, someone wants to buy a specific vehicle. This person wanted to buy an oil-based vehicle, and we convinced them to buy a hybrid vehicle, for example. Something else that we have seen as a key element when it comes to the protection of the environment and these initiatives has to do with also helping them with technology. We've been working with productive chains, and we have to see how we can help them incorporate technology in productive value chains. We right now have a project with a business that has trout in the rural area, and with AICA, the Japanese Development Agency, we have been able to work. As you know, aquaculture is essential. It allows us to improve feeding, and it allows us to see how to pollute less. In this case, the lake where the trout are being raised. So we have adopted certain technologies to ensure that is the case. This project is a 4-year project, and we are seeing how we can convey all this information to small farmers in the area so that they can also be more efficient, pollute less, and increase. But I believe this is something that will take a long time. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but we need to start to do this kind of work. How to implement these initiatives in the rural sector, focusing on technology to increase a lot efficiency, make projects sustainable, and at the same time having a lower environmental impact. Also, farmers are also always interested in profitability. So one has to balance profitability and sustainability. Yes, you need the carrot there. Yes, without the carrot, we will not mobilize them.
Give you some answers from the Q&A for you, so you can raise the hand when you want to answer it, because it's general answers for everybody. So I have 2 questions here. Briefly, with the time we have, we still have 13 minutes. What are you doing to strengthen member participation in the governance of the financial cooperatives? And also, which are the aspects in which member participation is more important for the development of the rural cooperatives? No sé si quieren que lo traduzca. Bueno, me imagino que se tradujo en
Should I translate it? I think it was translated into Spanish. So I would give the floor to Elenita, Isabel, or Jose to answer this question. Who wants to go first?
Okay.
Sí.
Okay.
You go after, Elenita? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, first, Isabel. Thanks.
Bueno, sí, con respecto a qué se está haciendo, pues las cooperativas.
Regarding what we are doing, savings and loans associations in Colombia have been developing, as Jose said before, this generational change that we are seeing. We have to take our young people into account, because cooperative leaders are many times people with a long trajectory, sometimes from the establishment of these cooperatives itself. And large cooperatives have their own institutions to train officials and to have a seed of people who could be members of a board of directors, people who are professionals in all these areas, where they can have a broad knowledge of the functioning of cooperatives, because it's not the same to lead the cooperatives than to lead other sectors. So in our case, we have a certain diploma that is received by the person who is trained, and they get this title, which allows them to be delegates and reach the high echelons of the company. And the presence of women is also something that is very important. We have in Colombia managers and chairpersons of entities who are women. Now we are seeing an increase in the participation of women in the leading of these projects, obviously with the support of our executive directors. And this female presence has allowed us to develop and growth, and it will guarantee that we can continue having more stronger cooperative and cooperatives with a good capitalization, and they can continue to go down the road toward a better strengthening and support to their members.
I'm wondering about the time, but I give you the answer. Thanks.
Okay, is it me? Okay, in addition to what Isabel already mentioned, it is very common in many credit unions here in Asia that they have women and youth in the board. It's a special position for the women and youth because we give importance for the participation of women because more than 50% of members of credit unions are women. And for youth, it's because we see that youth participation in credit union is really insignificant. So we want to draw the attention of the young people. For large credit unions, usually they are holding sectoral meetings before the annual general meeting to ensure that all members' voice are heard to the general meeting. So that's.
Thank you, Elenita. Another question related to loans. When you provide loans, how do you incentivize borrowers on time repayment? Any lesson learned to share for communities with little understanding on repayment culture? No sé si se entendió bien en español. Mi inglés medio machucado.
I don't know if this was understood in Spanish. Do you want to answer this question, Isabel, and then Jose? Isabel. Well, yes, I think the prompt payment culture is promoted when we adapt payments to productive activities. That has been the fundamental issue. Jose, in line with Isabel is saying, the payment cycles are key. But when we reach out to other producer associations, and this depends on the vision of the officials of the cooperative, we see that there is a principle of cooperation. When these rural communities commit to payment in total, it improves the situation, because sometimes we have had communities where one person is in charge of these payments, and this is not as good. So payment culture must be extensive to the community. When you have a producer association, a coffee growers association, where you have only one person who is the spokesman or spokeswoman, it's very difficult to have a good payment situation. But when we have meetings where the community elects its authorities, their payment culture is better, and there is a good repayment situation. But that depends also on the credit official, that we have to learn and we have to listen to the community as well. So when we think that something might be not right, we do not get involved with those loans. Elenita.
Yes, yes, it is incentivized here because credit unions has a policy. It's called, they are classifying member in good standing. If the members are paying the loan on time, it's one criteria to become a member in good standing. And there are privileges that goes with it.
Thank you. Bueno, otra pregunta, ya estamos.
Okay, another question. We're very close to the end, but this question is to Isabel and Jose. Apart from awareness raising and technical support to the members, what can financial products offer to have people adopt climate smart agricultural practices? What do you think when it comes to the product? Is there an incentive that can be attached to the product? Let's say if we develop a product in a certain way, can we develop in a way that it can educate or raise awareness in the field of climate change? Yes, I think we discussed this earlier. We are trying to introduce technologies in the rural sector that will improve their cost, their efficiency, and be profitable as well. So we need to think about climate smart agriculture. It has to be profitable, but it also has to be friendly in climatic terms. It might be costly initially, but further on, it will provide a good rate of return. And what we also do is to offer benefits and incentives when you carry out this type of project or initiative, technical assistance, better costs, or access to other services. Yes, go ahead, Isabel. Supplementing Jose's answer, and I think we had replied to a similar question before, the fact that we can be a link to provide incentives to people for clean production. But for that, we need to also support enterprises that are producing inputs and machinery that will allow for clean production, for a better environment, and so that the agri-food entrepreneurs can think that it is good to invest a little bit more now, because in the future we will have results that will benefit the entire community, because this is a global issue. Precisely. I remember I worked in the field in Colombia, and it's always important to link profitability with climate smart production. So, with certain loans and certain programs by international organizations, we can go into clean production in areas where there was no production of this type before. Okay, I think time is of the essence here. The questions we received tell us that there was interest in this issue. We could have discussed this further, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. I would like to thank the panelists profusely, Isabel and Elenita and Jose, for having accepted to share their experiences, their contributions, their ideas, which allow us to delve into non-traditional issues and evaluate the fundamental role that cooperatives play in the revitalization of the rural sector, which is very challenged. Thank you very much to the entire audience, which followed this seminar from all over the world. I hope this discussion can help them in their professional activities. And thank you for being with us this morning. You will have available the recording of this event in 3 languages. And best of luck to all. I must remind all of you that we are all agents of change, and we are working in the field of cooperation, and we're interested in a better and more equal world. So greetings, thanks again to Elenita, Jose, and Isabel, and also Anne-Marie from the World Bank and all colleagues from the World Bank who supported this activity and who allowed us to discuss these interesting issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.